My name is Nadia Calloway. I'm 34 years old. And 8 months ago, I sat in my car in the parking garage of Meridian Solutions and watched a girl sit down at my desk through the glass wall of the office. She opened my files like they were already hers. She didn't know I was still there. Nobody did. I had just returned my badge at 4:47 p.m. HR was professional about it. Clean, bloodless. A manila envelope, a signature. A handshake from a man whose name I still can't bring myself to say. Then the elevator. Then the parking garage. Then my car. I sat there for 22 minutes. I know because I counted. That's the thing about me. I count everything. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where quiet people draw their lines and walk through fire without raising their voice. If you've ever given everything to a job, to friends, to people you trusted, and then looked up one day to find the room empty, you'll understand this one. Drop a comment and subscribe. I've worked in data operations for 9 years. Before Meridian Solutions, I worked at a logistics company in Cincinnati called Hartwell and Gray. I started there at 24 years old. I had a business degree, a student loan that followed me everywhere, and a stubbornness I couldn't explain. It was just there. Part of me, like eye color. I was good at my job from the beginning, not in a showy way, in a quiet, consistent way. I could look at a broken system and see exactly where it was broken. I could look at a spreadsheet full of noise and find the one number that didn't belong. I didn't need anyone to tell me something was wrong. I could feel it. In my third week at Hartwell and Gray, I found a reporting error that had been costing the company around $40,000 every 3 months. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I fixed it, wrote it up in one paragraph, and sent it to my supervisor on a Tuesday morning at 8:14. He forwarded it to his director. The director forwarded it to the VP. By Friday, I had a meeting I never asked for and a raise I never negotiated. That was the day I understood something important. Numbers are the quietest way to be heard. Meridian Solutions recruited me 7 years ago. The offer was better. The role was bigger. The office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Columbus, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light beautifully. When I walked in on my first day, I felt like things were going exactly where they were supposed to go. Meridian was a mid-sized operations consulting firm, 43 employees when I joined, 61 by my third year. I ran the data operations division, a team of 6 people. I reported directly to the VP of operations, a woman named Sandra Acaffer. Sandra was precise and demanding and fair. She expected results and I delivered them. We understood each other well. My team respected me. I know that because respect in a workplace is something you can feel. It's in how people show up, how they ask questions, whether they stay when things get hard. I ran a tight department. Deadlines were not suggestions. Quality was not optional. But I also stayed late when someone was struggling. I explained things as many times as it took. I believed that a strong team was made of people who actually understood their work, not people who were just afraid to get it wrong. That belief, I would later learn, was also my most expensive mistake. Before I tell you what Meridian did to me, I need to tell you about my life outside of that office. Because you need to know who I was before you can understand what it meant to try to take me apart. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus. The street is called Arbor Lane. There are 3 maple trees in front of the building. My neighbor Mr. Hessler leaves his recycling bin out 3 days too long every single week without fail. My apartment is on the 2nd floor. The windows face east. In the mornings when the light comes through the curtains and hits the hardwood floor, it looks like a photograph. I chose this apartment for those windows. And because the kitchen had enough counter space for a real cutting board. And because the building allowed dogs. Dog came 8 months before everything fell apart, which means she was there for all of it. Her name is Biscuit. She is a 3-year-old golden retriever mix with ears that can never decide which direction they want to go. She has a habit of sleeping with her chin on my foot whenever I sit at my desk. I adopted her from a rescue shelter on a Saturday in November. I had gone there to drop off some old blankets. I walked out 2 hours later having signed paperwork I had not planned to sign. I do not regret it for a single second. Biscuit has seen me at my worst. She has seen me eat cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row. She has seen me cry into a dish towel at 11 at night. She has seen me stare at my bedroom ceiling for so long that she eventually got up, walked across the room, and put her head on my chest. Like she was saying, I see you. You're still here. That's enough for tonight. She was right every single time. My mother's name is Nadia Calloway. She is 61 years old. She lives 40 minutes away in a suburb called Westerville. She has lived in the same house since 1993, the year I turned 3. The house has yellow shutters that she repaints every 5 years whether they need it or not. She has a garden in the back that she tends with patience and focus. I recognized those qualities in her long before I recognized them in myself, because I inherited them directly from her. My mother is not a loud woman. She doesn't make speeches. She doesn't offer advice unless you ask for it, but she shows up. That is her language. She shows up with food and with silence and with the kind of presence that asks nothing of you and costs her everything. I didn't fully understand this about her until I needed it. My school friend's name is Dina Marsh. We met in 7th grade in Mrs. Patterson's English class. Dina borrowed my pencil and returned it at the end of the period with a small smiley face drawn near the eraser. We have been friends for 22 years. She is a pediatric nurse. She is married to a quiet man named Robert who makes excellent chili and never interrupts anyone. They have a daughter named Zoe who is 7 years old and already reads at a 5th grade level. Dina reports this with the specific exhausted pride of a mother who knows she is in trouble. Dina texts me every single morning. Not long messages, just check-ins. How'd you sleep? Did you eat? Is biscuit being dramatic? Small things that add up over years to something enormous. I didn't understand the size of what they added up to until she was the only one still sending them. Now I need to tell you about the people I thought were my people. At Meridian, I had what I genuinely believed was a real social circle. Not just colleagues, friends, people I chose to spend time with, people I had trained, mentored, stayed late for, and celebrated with. There was Priya Anand. She was my senior data analyst. She joined the team 2 years after me. I personally walked her through every system, every process, every shortcut, and every mistake to avoid. Priya was sharp and ambitious. She laughed at exactly the right moments. We had lunch together 3 times a week. I knew her coffee order. I knew her sister's name. I knew she was saving to buy a house and that she wanted a dog but her apartment didn't allow them. There was Marcus Webb, my operations coordinator. I hired him myself straight out of Ohio State. He came with enthusiasm and very little practical experience. I spent 18 months turning him into someone who could run a full quarterly audit without any help. He brought donuts on Fridays. He called me Nadia Boss as a joke that stopped being a joke because it was accurate. There was Camille Torres, my data quality lead. She had transferred from another department, and I absorbed her into my team and taught her everything she now knew about process documentation and error tracking. Camille organized the team birthday celebrations. She remembered everyone's. She remembered mine. These were my work people, my Meridian family, or so I believed. I want to be careful about that word, believed, past tense, because what I know now is that what I had was not friendship. What I had was proximity. And proximity, when the circumstances that created it disappear, has a very short life. There was also a woman named Jessica from the finance team. I had mentored her informally for about a year. She once told me I was the most generous professional she had ever met. I thought about that sentence a lot in the months that followed, about how little it ended up meaning when things got hard. The first sign came in February. I saw it and I did not name it, not because I was naive. I am not naive, but because I had spent 7 years building something I believed in, and I was not ready to let the numbers tell me what they were already clearly saying. Sandra called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon. The meeting was not on my calendar. Sandra scheduled everything. She did not do drop-ins. I could see her through the glass wall as I walked toward her office. Her hands were folded on her desk. Her face was professionally neutral. The kind of neutral that means something has already been decided and this conversation is just a formality. I sat down. She told me that due to a restructuring of the data operations division, the company would be bringing in a new role, a director of data strategy, someone with a specific background in AI integrated systems. She said this was the direction the industry was moving and the direction Meridian intended to move with it. She told me this person would be coming in at a senior level. She told me that during the transition period, it would be very helpful if I could provide onboarding support. She did not use the word replacement. She did not have to. I kept my face exactly where it was. Level, still. The same face I use when I find a large error in a report and need a moment to decide how to present it. Of course, I said, whatever the team needs. I drove home that night and sat on my kitchen floor with Biscuit's head in my lap for 40 minutes without turning on a single light. Her name was Jade Whitmore. She was 28 years old. She had a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon and the confident energy of someone who had been told they were exceptional so many times that they had stopped questioning it. She was not incompetent. I want to be fair about that. She knew the theory. She understood the frameworks. What she did not know was the practical side of the systems she was inheriting, the workarounds we had built over years, the vendor relationships we had carefully maintained, the specific logic behind decisions that looked random on paper but had very precise histories behind them. That is what I was there to teach her. And I did. I taught her everything. I documented things I had never written down before. I transferred knowledge that lived only in my head. I sat beside her for 6 weeks, 3 hours every day, and I built her a complete manual for a job that had taken me 7 years to master. I did it because Sandra asked me to. I did it because I am a professional. I did it because some part of me still believed that if I was cooperative enough and gracious enough, the outcome would somehow be different. Numbers don't lie. But sometimes you look at them and choose not to read them. The layoff came on a Monday. Not a Friday, which is when companies usually do these things. A Monday, which told me they were not worried, which told me they considered it clean and simple. The HR manager's name was Brett. He was apologetic in the way of someone reading from a script they didn't write. Restructuring, redundant roles, generous severance, a reference letter available on request. I signed what needed to be signed. I shook the hand that was offered. I took the manila envelope. I went to my desk and packed a small box. My desk plant, a pothos I had kept alive for 4 years that everyone called Gerald for reasons nobody could remember, a framed photo of Biscuit, and a coffee mug my mother had given me that said quietly powerful on the side. She had bought it at a farmer's market. I had initially found it a little embarrassing. By the end, I found it necessary. Priya walked past my desk twice while I was packing. She did not stop. She looked at her screen with the focused attention of someone working very hard at not seeing something right in front of them. Marcus said, "That's rough, Nadia. I'm sorry." He said it quietly, looking at the floor. Then he went back to his desk. Camille was not in the office that day. I carried the box to the elevator. I rode down 14 floors. I walked through the lobby and through the glass doors and into the parking garage. I got into my gray Toyota Corolla. I sat there for 22 minutes while a girl I had spent 6 weeks teaching sat down at my desk and opened my files. Then I drove home to Biscuit. She met me at the door the way she always does. Tail going, eyes bright, like my being gone for 4 hours was the longest separation she had ever survived. I set the box down on the floor. I sat down next to it. She climbed into my lap, all 52 pounds of her, which she has done since she was a puppy and clearly intends to keep doing forever. I put my face in her fur. I didn't cry yet. That came later. That night I just sat there on my entryway floor with my plant and my mug and my dog. And I let myself understand what had just happened. 7 years. 6 weeks of training. 1 manila envelope. The ledger was already looking very unbalanced, and I hadn't even gotten sick yet. I want to tell you something about losing a job you were good at. People think the hardest part is the money, the rent, the bills, the way you start putting things back at the grocery store. And yes, that part is very real. I am not going to pretend it isn't. But the hardest part, the part nobody warns you about, is the silence. The silence where your purpose used to be. For 7 years I had woken up every morning at 6:15 with somewhere to be, something that needed me. And then one morning I woke up at 6:15 and there was nothing. Just Biscuit staring at me from the foot of the bed with her head tilted to one side, waiting for a routine that still made sense to her even though it no longer made sense to me. I fed her. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a cursor blinking in an empty search bar. And I thought, I am 34 years old and I have to start over. And I don't know how to do that without feeling like I am apologizing for something I didn't do wrong. I made myself a deal that first morning. 1 week. 1 week to feel it. To sit with the unfairness of it without performing okayness for anyone. 1 week before I opened my resume and started rebuilding. I thought 1 week was enough. I thought 1 week was generous even. I did not know that my body had a completely different plan, and that it was about to make that plan very clear to me whether I was ready or not. The symptoms started on day 4. I thought it was stress. Of course I did. I had just lost my job. I wasn't sleeping properly. I wasn't eating properly. There was a headache sitting behind my eyes like something heavy that wouldn't move, and a tiredness that didn't feel like regular tired. It felt like gravity had personally decided to press down harder on me specifically. I drank more water. I went to bed earlier. I told myself it would pass the way stress passes when you give it a little room. I was wrong. I had already been wrong once about something I should have seen coming. This was the second time in the same month. By day 7, I had a fever of 101, and I could not stand up from my couch without the room tilting sideways. I called my doctor's office and got an appointment for the next morning. Biscuit spent the whole day pressed against my legs. That is what she does when something is wrong. She always knows before I am ready to admit it. She is, honestly, a better judge of these things than I am. My doctor's name was Dr. Anita Reeves. I had been seeing her for 6 years. She was calm and thorough, and the kind of doctor who watches your face while she talks to make sure the words are actually landing. She ran blood work. She asked careful questions. She pressed on specific points. And then she sat across from me with her hands folded in a way that told me before she even opened her mouth that this was not something rest and water were going to fix. She told me I had autoimmune hepatitis. She explained it clearly and without rushing. My immune system had turned against my liver. It happens sometimes, she said. Sometimes triggered by stress. Sometimes by a virus. Sometimes by nothing anyone can identify. It was treatable, it was manageable, but it was not going to resolve in a week or two. I would need medication, regular monitoring, significant rest, and a serious reduction in stress. She said that last part with a small pause. The kind of pause that acknowledges the cruelty of telling someone who just lost their job to please calm down. I drove home very carefully that afternoon. I sat in my building's parking lot for a few minutes before going upstairs. Not 22 minutes this time, maybe 5. I was too tired for 22 minutes. I went upstairs and fed Biscuit and sat on my couch and picked up my phone and called my mother. I told her what Dr. Reeves had said. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll be there tomorrow morning." I said, "Mom, you really don't have to." She said, "I know. I'll be there at 9." And she hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand and Biscuit's chin on my knee, and I thought, at least there is that. At least there is her. My mother arrived at 8:53 the next morning. That is Nadia Calloway's version of 9 o'clock. She is not capable of being late for something that matters to her. She came with 2 bags of groceries, a container of her homemade chicken soup with the dill and the egg noodles, a new water bottle because she had decided mine was not big enough, and a small potted succulent that she placed on my windowsill without any explanation at all. She took one look at me standing in my doorway and her face did something complicated. Then it went very still. That is what her face does when she is feeling something large and has decided that right now is not the time for it. She came in. She put the groceries away. She reheated the soup. She sat across from me at my kitchen table while I ate and she talked about her garden. About Mr. Henderson next door who had planted his tomatoes in the wrong spot again and was going to be very disappointed come August. About the book she was reading. About nothing and everything. Just filling the apartment with the ordinary sound of her voice. And slowly, without me even noticing, the silence in every corner started to feel a little smaller. She came back 3 days later, and 3 days after that. She didn't ask me every time how I was feeling because she could see how I was feeling. She didn't tell me everything was going to be fine because my mother does not make promises she cannot guarantee. What she did was show up. Every time, without being asked twice. She brought food. She sat with me. She took Biscuit for walks on the days I couldn't manage the stairs. And she never once made me feel like a burden. Even though I felt like one every single day, and was working very hard not to say it out loud. Dina came on the third day after my diagnosis. She came straight from a 12-hour shift, still in her scrubs, a pharmacy bag in one hand and a coffee in the other. She sat on the edge of my couch and asked me specific questions about my medication and my dosage and my follow-up schedule. She took photos of my prescription bottles, which I found slightly invasive and completely comforting at the same time. She stayed for 2 hours. At the door, she squeezed my hand and said, "You text me if anything changes. Anything, I don't care what time it is." I said, "I know." She said, "I mean it, Nadia." I said, "I know that too, Dina." And I did. She texted me every morning the same as always. "How'd you sleep? Did you eat? Is Biscuit being dramatic?" Every single day at 7:08 without exception. And on the mornings when I woke up feeling like the medication was winning and the fatigue was sitting on my chest like a physical object, those messages were the first proof I had that the world outside my apartment was still moving, and that someone in it was thinking about me specifically. Now I need to tell you about the other messages, the ones that stopped. In that first week after the layoff, before the diagnosis, I had heard from my Meridian circle. Priya sent a text. "That is so unfair, I'm so sorry." Marcus sent a voice note, 40 seconds, ending with "Let me know if you need anything, okay." Camille sent a series of warm messages over 2 days and offered lunch 3 separate times. Jessica from finance sent a long message about what a loss I was to the company and how valued I was. I read all of them. I replied to each one with something genuine. And then I got sick, and I told a few of them, Priya and Camille and Jessica, that I was dealing with a health issue on top of everything and would be slower to respond for a while. Priya replied with heart emojis and "please rest and feel better soon," then nothing for 11 days. Then a message about a restaurant she had tried that she thought I would like, which told me she had processed my health situation and filed it under resolved. Camille sent a voice note full of real concern that ended with "we should get lunch when you are feeling better." She said the same thing 3 weeks later when she messaged again. The lunch never became a real plan. It stayed a future intention. Which is the politest possible way to make sure something never actually happens. Marcus did not respond to the message about my illness at all. Not because he was cruel. Marcus was not cruel. He was 27 and uncomfortable with anything that required him to sit with someone else's hard thing for more than the length of a voice note. Jessica from finance went completely quiet. Her last message to me was that long warm one from the week of my layoff. After that, nothing. I watched her post twice on LinkedIn in the following month. Professional updates about Meridian projects. And I thought about the year I had spent helping her understand data validation processes. And I thought about the silence. And I thought, this is information. This is data. I know how to read data. I opened a new document on my laptop. I am a data operations manager. Old habits have excellent survival instincts. I titled the document simply, "Who showed up?" 2 columns. I didn't need to fill them in carefully. The pattern was already clear enough to read without any help. The medication made me tired in a way I had never experienced before. Not the tired of a long week or a bad night's sleep. A deep, cellular kind of tired. Like my body had redirected every available resource toward the fight happening inside it and had nothing left over for anything else. I slept 10, 11 hours and woke up feeling like I had slept 3. There were days when getting from my bed to my bathroom felt like an achievement worth documenting. There were days when I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my resume on the screen, and I could not make myself type a single word. Because the gap between who I had been 3 weeks ago and who I was sitting in this chair felt too wide to cross. Biscuit was extraordinary during this time. I want to say that clearly because she deserves it said clearly. She adjusted herself to match me the way dogs do when they are truly paying attention, which Biscuit always is. On the days I could manage a slow walk around the block, she trotted beside me at my pace. Ears going their usual undecided direction. Tail at a calm, steady speed. On the days I couldn't manage the stairs, she lay beside me on the couch with her warm weight against my side. And there is something about the way a dog breathes when it is resting next to you. The simple, uncomplicated rhythm of it. That is genuinely healing in a way I cannot explain scientifically but will defend completely. She didn't need me to be well. She didn't need me to be the version of myself that ran a team of 6 and found large errors on her third week at a new job. She just needed me to be there. And on the days when being there was the absolute most I could manage, she accepted it as enough and pressed herself a little closer to make sure I knew she did. It was on one of those couch days, about 3 weeks into the illness, that the idea came to me, not in a flash, not like a light switching on, more like a question I couldn't stop turning over. I had been lying there with Biscuit and the television on low and my phone on my stomach. I had been thinking about the rent coming in 11 days, about the severance that would cover this month and maybe next, about the job applications I had started and not finished because my concentration kept sliding away from me, and the question that came was this: what can I actually do right now, today, in this body, in this apartment? Not what I used to do, not what I will do when I recover. What can I do right now? The answer, when I looked at it practically instead of emotionally, was more than I expected. I could type. I could communicate clearly. I could stay calm during difficult conversations. I had been doing that for years. I could work from my couch, from my bed if necessary, with Biscuit beside me and my medication on the coffee table and a blanket over my legs. I searched for remote call center jobs that evening. I applied to 3. I heard back from one within 48 hours. The company was called Brightline Customer Solutions. They handled customer service for a mid-sized insurance company. The pay was not what I had earned at Meridian. It was nowhere close to what I had earned at Meridian. But it was real. It was immediate. And I could do it without leaving my apartment. In that moment, those 3 things were worth more than any title I had ever held. I did my interview on a Thursday afternoon sitting at my kitchen table in a navy blazer and pajama pants, which is the specific kind of dignity that remote work during an illness allows. The interviewer was a cheerful woman named Karen who spoke with the efficient warmth of someone who has done this exact interview about 400 times. I told her I was highly organized, calm under pressure, and very good with people. All of which was true. She offered me the position before the call ended. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I started the following Monday, and I want to be honest with you about what that first week felt like, because this story is not about pretending to be strong. It felt humbling in a way I had not prepared myself for. I had spent 9 years building real expertise. I had spent 7 of those years leading a team, making decisions, solving problems that required experience and judgment and years of knowledge. And now I was sitting in my living room with a headset on, reading from a script about insurance claim procedures to people who were often frustrated and sometimes unkind. I did it in the same calm, even voice I use for everything, because that voice is not something I perform. It is just who I am. But the distance between who I was and where I was sitting was something I felt in my chest every single day that first week. Not shame exactly, something closer to grief. Grief for the version of me that had walked into that 14th floor office and known exactly what she was doing and why. I let myself feel it for exactly as long as it took to clock out each evening. Then I fed Biscuit and took my medication and opened my job applications and kept working. Because here is what I also knew. Underneath the grief and the exhaustion and the specific hurt of having trained my own replacement and then gotten sick in the same month, I knew I was not finished. I was nowhere near finished. I was a woman who had found a large error in her 3rd week at a job and fixed it before anyone asked her to. I was a woman who had built a team from scratch and made it run clean. I was a woman who, at her lowest point, in her sickest week, had looked at what she had available and found a way to keep going. I was not the person that manila envelope had tried to make me. I just needed a little more time to show it. And I had something the people who had gone quiet did not know I had. A document on my desktop called Who Showed Up, and a second one, newer and quieter, that I had simply titled Next. And that one was filling up faster than anyone would have expected. There is a kind of strength that doesn't look like strength from the outside. It doesn't stand up straight and give speeches. It doesn't post about its journey online with a sunrise photo and a caption about never giving up. It looks like a woman in an oversized sweater sitting at her kitchen table at 7:30 in the morning with a headset around her neck and a cup of coffee going cold beside her. Answering calls about insurance claims with the same calm patience she once used to present reports to a boardroom. It looks like that same woman, after her shift ends, opening a second window on her laptop and spending 45 minutes updating her resume before the tiredness pulls her back to the couch. It looks like small, quiet, daily effort. No audience. No applause, nobody watching. That is what my rebuild looked like. And I want you to understand it fully before I tell you how it ended. Because the ending only means something if you understand what it cost to get there. The Brightline job settled into a rhythm within the first 2 weeks. I won't pretend it became easy. What it became was manageable, which is a different thing, and in many ways a more honest thing. I learned their systems quickly because I learned systems quickly. That is simply how my mind works. My supervisor Karen noticed within the first 10 days that my call resolution rate was higher than average, and my customer satisfaction scores were consistently near the top. She mentioned it on our second weekly check-in with the tone of someone who had not entirely expected it. I noted that without saying anything. I was not there to impress Karen. I was there to pay my rent and to have something structured to hold on to while the rest of my life was being put back together. But I did my job the way I do every job. Completely. Carefully, because I don't know how to do things halfway. It is not something I practiced. It is just who I am. The medication was beginning to stabilize by the end of the first month. Dr. Reeves adjusted the dosage twice in those early weeks. She watched my liver numbers closely the way you watch something delicate that needs precise handling. By week 5, she told me she was cautiously encouraged by what she was seeing. For Dr. Reeves, cautiously encouraged was basically a celebration. I received it as one. The tiredness was still there, but it had changed. It had shifted from something I was carrying to something I was learning to navigate. There were still hard days. Days when getting from my bed to my kitchen felt like a decision that needed planning. But they were becoming less frequent. And I was getting better at reading them, at knowing when to push through and when to simply lie down with Biscuit and let the day be smaller than I had planned for it. My mother came every Tuesday and every Saturday, without being asked. This became so consistent that Biscuit started waiting by the front door on Tuesday mornings, with a focused, serious expression that told me she had the schedule memorized better than I did. My mother would arrive, greet Biscuit with the enthusiastic attention that Biscuit has decided she is owed as a matter of basic respect, and then come into the kitchen and start doing something useful without discussing it first. Cooking or cleaning or organizing my medication into a weekly pill container she had bought without telling me. I had planned to find that last thing a little condescending. Instead, I found it one of the most quietly loving things anyone had ever done for me. She would stay 2 or 3 hours. We would talk. Sometimes about important things, and sometimes about nothing at all. And when she left, the apartment felt lighter, like something heavy had been gently removed while I wasn't paying attention. Dina came on weekends when her schedule allowed. Not every weekend, but often enough that I could count on it. She brought things. Not always food, though sometimes food. Once she brought a 1,000-piece puzzle of a botanical garden that she said was meditative, and that we spent 3 Saturday afternoons completing on my coffee table with Biscuit's nose periodically threatening the corner pieces. Once she brought a book she had already read and wanted to talk about. We sat on opposite ends of my couch for 2 hours discussing it, and it was the most normal I had felt in weeks. Not sick Nadia, not unemployed Nadia, not the Nadia who was quietly rebuilding in the background hoping nobody noticed how hard it was. Just Nadia, talking about a book with her oldest friend on a Saturday afternoon while a dog rearranged herself between them looking for the most comfortable position. I want you to hold on to these things as I tell you the rest. The Tuesday arrivals, the morning texts, the puzzle on the coffee table, the soup in the container, the succulent on the windowsill that my mother had placed there without explanation, and that I watered every 3 days because it was alive and in my care, and I take that seriously. These small, consistent, unglamorous acts of showing up. I want you to hold them because they are the real story. Everything else, the job, the rebuild, the conversation that was coming, all of that is just the frame. These things are the painting. It was during the 6th week of my illness that I found the job posting that changed everything. I had been applying steadily, 3 to 5 applications every week. I was not sending my resume everywhere just to feel busy. I was reading each job description carefully, finding the specific problems the company was trying to solve, writing cover letters that spoke directly to those problems. It took longer than just applying to everything, but it worked better. By week 4, I had 3 first-round interviews. By week 6, I had 2 second rounds, which, considering I was doing all of this while managing an autoimmune condition and working a part-time call center job from my couch, was something I was quietly proud of even if I told nobody. The posting that changed everything was from a company called Vantage Point Analytics. They were a data consulting firm, larger than Meridian, offices in Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, a strong client list. The role was Senior Director of Data Operations, one level above where I had been at Meridian. The salary range listed was also one level above what I had been earning at Meridian. Meaningfully so. I looked at it twice to make sure I had read it correctly. The job description read like someone had asked me directly about my professional beliefs and then written them down word for word. Systems integrity, team development, cross-functional process design, a specific focus on building operations that could sustain themselves beyond any one person's knowledge. That last part stopped me, because that was exactly what I had always believed in. And exactly what Meridian had spent 6 weeks extracting from my brain before deciding they no longer needed the brain it came from. I wrote the cover letter over 2 evenings. I took my time with it. I read it 4 times. I changed 2 sentences and then changed them back. I sent it on a Thursday night at 9:47 p.m. I told Biscuit I had sent it because she was sitting beside me when I hit send, and she seemed to feel she deserved to know. She accepted this information with her chin on my knee and her eyes half closed, which is Biscuit's version of a supportive nod. I closed my laptop, took my medication, went to bed, and I told myself what I tell myself every night. Tomorrow is another day of work. That is enough. That has always been enough. They called me the following Tuesday. I was on a Brightline call when my personal phone lit up with a Columbus number I didn't recognize. I finished the customer call first. Then I stepped away from my desk and called the number back. The woman who answered was named Claire Donnelly. She was the director of talent acquisition at Vantage Point Analytics. She had a direct, unhurried way of speaking that I respected immediately. She told me my application had stood out. People say that in recruiting calls all the time, so I received it carefully. Then she told me specifically why it had stood out, which people almost never do. She said the cover letter had been unusually precise about the operational problems the role was designed to solve. She said the leadership team had found it, and she used this exact word, refreshing. I scheduled the first round interview for the following week. I spent the days between then and the interview preparing the way I prepare for everything. Systematically, I researched the company's publicly available work and client outcomes. I identified the questions I would ask that would show I understood not just the role but the business around it. I practiced my answers not by memorizing scripts, but by thinking through my real experience carefully enough that the right words would come naturally when I needed them. I did all of this while working my Brightline shifts, while managing my medication, while keeping my apartment clean enough that it didn't add to my mental load, while walking Biscuit on the mornings I had energy for it, and accepting my mother's help on the mornings I didn't. I did all of it without telling anyone except my mother and Dina, because I had learned something over these past months about the cost of placing your hope in front of an audience. This rebuild was mine. I was keeping it that way until there was something real to show. The first round interview was on a video call with Claire and one of the operations directors, a measured and thoughtful man named David Park. He asked the kind of questions that tell you immediately whether a company actually understands what it needs. He did. We talked for an hour and 10 minutes. When the call ended, I sat still for a moment and took stock of how it had felt, because I have learned to trust that feeling, whether a conversation felt like a performance or a real dialogue. This one had felt like a real dialogue. That meant something. The second round was 2 weeks later, in person at their Columbus office, which meant real clothes and driving downtown and sitting in a room with 4 people for 90 minutes and being completely sharp for all of it, which required careful energy management given where my health still was. I told Dr. Reeves about the interview at my check in the week before. She told me my numbers were continuing to improve and that 90 minutes was entirely manageable as long as I rested properly beforehand and didn't try to make a full day of it. I told her I had already planned exactly that. She smiled in a way that suggested she had a reasonable understanding of who she was dealing with by this point. I drove to the Vantage Point office on a Wednesday morning in late April. I wore a charcoal blazer and dark trousers, and the small gold stud earrings my mother had given me for my 30th birthday. I wear those earrings when I need to feel like the full version of myself. I sat in the lobby for 4 minutes before they called me in. I used those 4 minutes to breathe slowly, the way Dr. Reeves had suggested for managing stress. And to remind myself of something I had written in my clarity document 3 weeks earlier on a day when the tiredness had been very heavy and the self-doubt had been very loud. I had written, "You did not lose your ability when you lost your job. They took the title. The knowledge is still yours. Go get a better title." The panel was 4 people: Claire, David Park, the VP of Operations named Helen Marsh, no relation to Dina, and the CEO of the Columbus Division, a quietly formidable woman named Dr. Patricia Ose, who asked only 2 questions the entire meeting. But her 2 questions were worth more than everything else in that room combined. The 90 minutes pass the way time passes when you are genuinely engaged. Not fast and not slow, but fully. With the texture of a conversation where both sides are really paying attention, I answered what they asked. I asked what I had prepared. I told them specifically what I would do in my first 90 days in the role. I told them why. I told them how I would measure whether it was working. Dr. Osai's second question was, "What did your last role teach you that you couldn't have learned any other way?" I took 3 seconds before answering. Long enough to be genuine, short enough to be confident. Then I said, "It taught me that institutional knowledge is only as valuable as the systems you build to protect it, and that the most important thing a leader can do is make herself unnecessary to the daily operation, so the operation can keep growing whether she is in the room or not." Dr. Ose looked at me for a moment and then wrote something on the notepad in front of her. I didn't know what it was. I chose to take it as a good sign. They called me with an offer on a Friday afternoon. I was on my couch with biscuit and a cup of chamomile tea and a book I was not entirely concentrating on when my phone rang. Claire's voice was warm and direct, and she did not make me wait through small talk to get to the number. The number was meaningfully higher than what I had earned at Meridian. There was also a signing bonus and a benefits package that included comprehensive health coverage. After the past 2 months of managing my own treatment and the paperwork that came with it, I understood the value of that in a way that was almost entirely new to me. I told Claire I needed 24 hours to review the offer letter, because that is the professional thing to say even when you already know the answer. She said, "Of course." We hung up. I set my phone face down on the couch beside me. Biscuit looked up at me. I looked at her. Then I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. I told her about the offer. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the voice she uses when something has moved her more than she planned to show, that she was very proud of me, not surprised. Proud. Those are different sentences, and she chose hers deliberately, and I understood exactly why. I told her I was going to accept it. She said she knew. I asked if she wanted to come for dinner Saturday to celebrate. She said she would bring the soup. I told her she didn't have to bring soup every single time. She said she was bringing the soup. I said okay. She said good. That was the whole conversation. It was exactly enough. I called Dina next. Dina's response was considerably louder and involved a sound that I believe startled Robert in the next room, because I heard him ask from a distance if everything was all right. And Dina said, "Yes, yes, Nadia got the job," and Robert said, "That's wonderful," in the calm, genuine way Robert says everything. Then Dina came back to the phone and told me in enthusiastic and specific detail exactly why this was what I deserved and why Meridian Solutions was going to feel this eventually, even if they didn't know it yet. I let her talk. It was the right thing to do, and I needed to hear every word of it. I accepted the offer the next morning. I gave myself the 24 hours I had promised Claire, not because I needed them, but because decisions that matter deserve the respect of not being rushed. I read the offer letter carefully. Every line, every term. The way I read everything that is going to carry my signature. It was fair, more than fair. I signed it and sent it back at 10:23 on a Saturday morning. Then I sat at my kitchen table, with my coffee and biscuits head resting on my foot, and I let myself feel something I had not allowed myself to feel in a very long time. I felt like myself, the complete version, the one who finds the errors and fixes them before anyone asks, the one whose ledger balances. And then 4 days later, my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. The main line for Meridian Solutions. I stared at it for 2 full rings. Then I answered. The voice on the other end was Sandra Ackaffers. Sandra's voice was exactly as I remembered it. Calm, controlled. She said my name and then she waited for me to respond. I said hello, Sandra. Then I waited too. Because Sandra never called just to talk. Whatever she had to say was going to come out on its own if I gave it space. She told me the team was having some challenges. She called it a transition period. I would have called it something else. She said certain processes were not running the way they should. She said there were gaps that were hard to fill from the inside. She said my name had come up more than once in their discussions. She said they were interested in a consulting arrangement. Flexible, project-based. A good rate. She made it sound reasonable. And maybe it was. If you forgot everything that had happened to get to this phone call, if you forgot the manila envelope and the 14 floors and the girl sitting at my desk opening my files, if you forgot all of that, then yes. It sounded perfectly reasonable. I let her finish, I didn't interrupt. When she was done, I took 4 seconds before I spoke. Not for drama, just because I wanted to get it right. Then I said, Sandra, I appreciate you calling. I want to be honest with you. I have already accepted a senior director position at another company. I start in 3 weeks. She went quiet. Then she said, I see. I said, I also want to say something else, because I think you can hear it. What happened to my role was a business decision. I understand that, but training me for 6 weeks and then letting me go was a decision about my value. And I think what you are dealing with right now is the result of that decision. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that is a fair assessment, Nadia. I said, I know. Then I said, I genuinely wish the team well, and I meant it. I really did. Even Priya, even Marcus, even Camille, I didn't wish them badly. I just wasn't willing to go back. We said goodbye. The call was 7 minutes and 40 seconds. I checked after we hung up. Because that is just who I am. I put my phone down on the table. Biscuit came across the room and leaned against my leg. She didn't make a big thing of it, she just put her weight against me so I would know she was there. I put my hand on her head. And I sat there for a while in my quiet apartment. The one with the east-facing windows. The hardwood floors. The succulent my mother put on the windowsill without explaining why. I thought about the girl I was 7 years ago walking into that building for the first time. I thought about the parking garage and the 22 minutes. I thought about the box with Gerald and the mug that said quietly powerful. I thought about the fever and the couch and the headset and the insurance scripts. I thought about all of it. And then I took Biscuit's leash off the hook and we went outside. We walked for 45 minutes. The maple trees on Arbor Lane were so green it almost looked unreal. I breathed the air and I let the phone call settle into its right place. It wasn't a victory exactly, but it was a closing. A final line drawn under something that had been open for 7 years. Balanced now, done. The 3 weeks between accepting the offer and starting the job were the quietest weeks I had in a long time. I kept working my Brightline shifts until the very last day before I started at Vantage Point. I had made a commitment, and I don't walk away from those just because things have gotten better. I was still taking my medication, still going to see Dr. Reeves. My numbers were good. She used the words very encouraging at my last check-in before I started the new job. For Dr. Reeves, that was basically a party. I received it as one. During those 3 weeks, I thought a lot about the people in the right column of my who showed up document. Not in an angry way. I am not an angry person by nature. I am a person who finds what is broken and fixes it and then builds something better in its place. The people who had gone quiet, Priya, Marcus, Camille, Jessica, I didn't need to say anything to them. They had already said everything with their silence. I had read it. I had acted on it. I had stopped putting energy into the places that kept coming back empty. That is not bitterness. That is just honest accounting, and I have always been good at honest accounting. What I did instead was have 3 conversations that actually mattered. The first was with my mother on the Saturday after I accepted the offer. She brought soup. Of course she brought soup. I had a bottle of wine I had been saving for something worth celebrating and I opened it that night. We sat at my kitchen table and talked for 3 hours. At some point she reached across and put her hand over mine and said, "You were never going to stay down. I always knew that." I said, "I know you did." She said, "I just wanted to make sure you knew I knew." I squeezed her hand. We went back to the soup and the wine. And I thought about what it means to have someone in your life who believes in you not because things are going well, but because they know who you actually are underneath all of it. The second conversation was with Dina. She came over on a Sunday and brought her daughter Zoe, who had been asking about Biscuit for 2 solid weeks. Zoe arrived buzzing with excitement, but went completely still when Biscuit appeared in the hallway, because Zoe is the kind of child who understands that some moments deserve stillness. Biscuit walked straight to her and pressed her nose gently against Zoe's hand. Zoe looked up at me like she had just witnessed something miraculous. I had to look away for a second. We spent 2 hours together, Zoe and Biscuit on the floor, Dina and I on the couch, talking in the way you talk when there is a child and a dog in the room, in pieces and fragments, catching sentences between interruptions. When they left, Dina hugged me at the door and said quietly, over Zoe's head, "I'm so glad you're okay. Not just the job, you," I said, "me too." And I meant it more than I had meant anything in months. The third conversation was with myself. On a Thursday evening 8 days before I started at Vantage Point, I sat at my desk after dinner and I opened the document called Clarity and I read it from the beginning, every entry, the ones from the darkest weeks. The one that said you did not lose your ability when you lost your job. They took the title. The knowledge is still yours. I read all of it slowly. Then I wrote one last entry. It said you ran the audit. The numbers are in. Update the ledger and close the books. I closed the laptop. Biscuit's chin found my foot. The apartment was quiet around me, the good kind of quiet, not the empty kind I had lived with for months, just peace, simple and honest peace. I started at Vantage Point on a Monday morning in May. I drove downtown in my gray Corolla with the cracked phone holder I still hadn't fixed. I parked in the building garage and rode the elevator to the 19th floor. 5 floors higher than Meridian. I walked into my corner office and put my bag down and stood at the window for a moment. Columbus in the early morning. Quiet streets. Spring light coming in low and golden. I had brought 3 things from home. A framed photo of Biscuit, my mother's quietly powerful mug, and Gerald the Pothos who had survived everything and honestly looked better than he ever had at Meridian. I took that as a sign. Helen Marsh, the VP, came to my office at 9 to welcome me. David Park stopped by mid-morning with a coffee and 3 operational problems he wanted my thoughts on. By noon I had met my team. 8 people. I already knew who was going to be strong and who was going to need development and what the first thing I was going to fix was. Because that is just how I work. A room full of people and a set of systems is a data set, and I have always known how to read a data set. I called my mother at lunch from a small park across from the building. She picked up on the second ring. I told her about the morning. She listened and asked a few questions and said it sounded exactly right. I told her it did. She asked if I had eaten. I told her I was eating right now actually. She said good. I said I would call her this weekend. She said she would bring soup. I told her she really did not have to bring soup every single time. She said she was bringing the soup. I said okay. She said good. I hung up smiling and sat in the sunshine and finished my sandwich and thought about how some people's consistency is its own kind of love language, and how lucky you have to have even one person in your life who speaks it fluently. Dina texted at 12:17. How'd the morning go? Did you eat? Is there a biscuit at the new office? I told her the morning went well. Yes, I was eating, and not yet, but I was looking. She sent back 3 exclamation points and a dog emoji, which from Dina is basically a standing ovation. I received it as one. I walked back into the building and rode up to the 19th floor and sat down at my desk and opened my laptop and got to work. Not because I was trying to prove something, not because anyone was watching, but because this is who I am. I find the broken things and fix them. I find the scattered things and steady them. I have always done it this way and I always will. That is not something anyone gave me, and it is not something anyone was able to take away. One last thing, about Priya. About 6 weeks after I started at Vantage Point, she sent me a message on LinkedIn. It was longer than I expected. She said she had heard I landed somewhere new and she was glad. She said she was sorry, not just about the layoff but about how she had handled it, about walking past my desk while I was packing and not stopping, about going quiet when I got sick. She said she had been thinking about it for months. She said she knew it was late. I read it twice. I thought about everything. The coffee orders and the lunches and the 6 weeks of training and the day she chose her screen over me. I thought about all of it. Then I wrote back. I said, "Thank you for sending this, Priya. I mean that. I hope things are going well for you." Both sentences were true. She replied with a simple thank you. And that was it. Not a new beginning, not a restored friendship. Just a door that had been left open finally being gently closed. Sometimes that is the most you can do with something that broke. And sometimes that is enough. I think about the version of me that sat in that parking garage 8 months ago. 22 minutes. Watching a girl open my files through the glass. I think about what she knew and what she didn't know yet. She knew she was good. She knew she had been treated unfairly. She knew her rent was coming and her body was about to betray her, and the people she trusted were about to show her who they really were when things stopped being easy. She knew Biscuit was waiting at home. She knew her mother would pick up on the second ring. She knew Dina would text in the morning. And underneath all of it, underneath the shock and the grief and the tiredness and the self-doubt and the headset and the scripts and the cover letters written on the hard days, she knew she was not finished. That knowing was everything. That knowing was the whole ledger. People will show you exactly who they are the moment you stop being useful to them. The ones who disappear were only ever there for what you could give. But the ones who stay, the ones who show up with soup and puzzles and morning texts, and a warm dog pressed against your side on the darkest days, those people were never there because of what you could do for them. They were there because of who you are. And there is a difference between those two things that changes everything once you finally see it clearly. That is my story. A layoff I did not earn, an illness I did not see coming, a rebuild nobody watched, and a ledger that finally says exactly what it should have said all along. My name is Nadia Calloway. I am 34 years old. I am the Senior Director of Data Operations at Vantage Point Analytics. I have a golden retriever named Biscuit who sleeps with her chin on my foot every single night. I have a mother who brings soup without being asked, and a friend who texts me every morning without fail, and a pothos named Gerald who has survived everything right along with me. I have a succulent on my windowsill and east-facing windows that catch the morning light just right. And for the first time in a long time, everything in my life is exactly where it belongs. Thank you for being here. If this story made you think about who is actually showing up for you, not just when things are good but when things are hard, hold on to those people. Tell them, today if you can. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.